Good morning, everyone. May I have your attention, please? Welcome to Government House. As official proceedings will shortly commence, now would be an opportune moment to ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or turned to silent. As the Governor arrives, you'll be asked to stand and remain standing. A fanfare will be played. This sounds like the Australian National Anthem, the distinction being it is the vice-regal salute and you do not sing. You'll be given the opportunity to sing the Australian National Anthem at the conclusion of the ceremony. Throughout the presentation of awards, please hold your applause until all recipients' names and citations have been read. When I return to the lectern in a few moments, it will be to announce the arrival of the Governor. Would you please be upstanding for the arrival of Her Excellency Professor the Honourable Margaret Gardner, Governor of Victoria.
Please be seated. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which Government House stands, the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. Your Excellency, I invite you to present the honours and awards in the Order of Australia. To be officers in the General Division, Professor Geoffrey Ian Borland, for distinguished service to business as a labour market economist, to tertiary education, to microeconomic research, and to public policy development. Professor Anne Elizabeth Buist, for distinguished service to psychiatry, to advancing best practice in perinatal mental health research and treatment, and to mental health education. Anthony Ray Burgess, for distinguished service to business, to tertiary education, to philanthropic corporate governance and benefaction, and to the arts. Dr. Michael Robert Carr Gregg, for distinguished service to child and adolescent psychology, to policy reform as an advocate and advisor, to youth cyber safety, and to the community. To be members in the General Division, the Honourable Bruce Norman Atkinson, for significant service to the people and Parliament of Victoria and to the region of Nunawading. Graham Roland Bass, for significant service to children's literature as an author and illustrator. Dr. Colin Glenn Begley, for significant service to haematology and oncology, medicine, and to research. Michael John Betts, for significant service to the community of Geelong. Professor Mark Cassidy, for service to geotechnical science, to engineering, and to academia. Emeritus Professor Colin Burton Chapman, for significant service to pharmacy and pharmaceutical science research, education, and practice. Justine Mary Clark, for significant service to architecture in a range of appointments. Kathleen Margaret Collette, for significant service to medicine in the field of radiology as a clinician and administrator. Professor Sean Patrick Collin, for significant service to tertiary education, to ecology, and to agricultural research. Philip Brian Cooper, for significant service to the Indigenous community of Victoria in a range of roles. Andrea Coote, for significant service to the people and Parliament of Victoria and to the aged care sector. Mary Jane Crabtree, for significant service to the legal profession, to community health, and to sport. Paul MacLeod Cross, for significant service to the arts and to secondary education. Barry William James, for significant service to the arts and to philanthropic initiatives. Rose Cuff, for significant service to community mental health and to youth. Robert Allen McGoran, for significant service to urban architectural design, planning and development, and to tertiary education. Sonia Petering, for significant service to the law and to the finance and business sectors. To receive the Distinguished Service Medal, Colonel John Richard James, for distinguished leadership in warlike operations as the Officer Commanding C Company 5th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment in South Vietnam in August 1969. To receive the Public Service Medal, Anne Lorraine Congleton, for outstanding public service in policy and service design, corporate resources management, and operational service delivery. Kate Leslie Gavins, for outstanding public service in leadership and innovation in environmental policy and legislation. Jodie Giesler, for outstanding public service in the health and mental health sectors of Victoria. Michaela Joy Hart, for outstanding public service to archival practice and access to records. Anthony John Colmus, for outstanding public service in the disability and social services sectors. Dean Michael Lee, for outstanding public service in the oversight and management of the Shrine of Remembrance. Maureen Veronica McCarthy, for outstanding public service in critical health workforce data and planning across Australian governments. Mukund Narayana Murthy, for outstanding public service in strengthening trade and investment relationships between Australia and Southeast Asia. Joan Ursula Phillips, for outstanding public service in environmental governance and stewardship. Jodie Salmon, for outstanding public service in the delivery of reform agendas to benefit Australians with disability. Catherine Lee Van Gerp, for outstanding public service in leading key reforms across law enforcement agencies. Elizabeth Marie Wilson, for outstanding public service and leadership in digital capability and safety in public education. To receive the Medal of the Order of Australia in the General Division, Dale Victor Alchin, for service to the community of Port Melbourne. Albert Armstrong, for service to Squash. Chinthakra Indanil Samawira Atakola for service to the municipal community of the Shepparton District. Elizabeth Ann Eilert for service to netball. Neil Graham Barker for service to the wholesale fish produce sector. Elizabeth Bate for service to the community of Lara. Vivian Martin Beaumont for service to the community through a range of roles. Roxanne Elizabeth Bennett for service to the community of Geelong. Paul Jonathan Birch for service to the community through a range of roles. Sylvia Janice Black for service to community history. Auntie Helen Bell Benads for service to the Indigenous community of Melbourne. Dr. Stephen Nicholas Bolson for service to medicine as an anaesthetist. Robert Bonchek for service to the Jewish community of Melbourne and to the media. Rita Bente Brown for service to community health. William James Bruns for service to the communities of Kahuna and Lichtville. Dr. Victor Paul Pucheri, for service to the Italian community of Melbourne. Professor Shane Peter Bullock, for service to community health. Dr. Kevin John Cameron, for service to music and to education. Dr. Roberto Calada, for service to medicine as a general practitioner. James Christopher Child, for service to local government and to the community of the Yarra Ranges. Antonio Cipriano, for service to youth through Scouts. Alan David Clayton, for service to conservation and the environment and the community. Reginald Gordon Cleland, for service to equestrian sports. Philip Lee Clifford, for service to the community of Maffra. Matthew John Coleman, for service to the agricultural show sector. Petros Christoph Kopoulos, for service to the community through charitable organisations. Carolyn Claire Creswell, for service to the food industry as an entrepreneur. Marcus Paul Crook, for service to the community through the not-for-profit sector. Stephen Andrew Curtis, for service to the Jewish community of Melbourne. Alex Leslie Daphner, for service to the Jewish community of Melbourne. Colleen Marie Davis, for service to the community of Wangaratta. Alexander Francis Del Porto, for service to local government and to the community of Bayside. The late Graham Sidney Dickinson, to be received by his wife, Margaret Fleur Dickinson, in recognition of his service to the community of Gisborne. Terence Dunn, for service to community sport. Margaret Ann Diamond, for service to motorsports. Peter David Edgar, for service to the community of Cobram. Beverly Ann Edwards, for service to the community of the Cardinia region. Robert James Edwards, for service to the community. William Wardrew Ellis, for service to the community through emergency response organisations. George Andrew Irma, for service to the community through a range of organisations. Graham Richard Etherington, for service to the performing arts as an entertainer. Janine Valerie Hayes, for service to the skydiving industry. Gerard O'Donnell, for service to the community through a range of organisations. John Bennett Watson, for service to veterans. To receive the Australian Antarctic Medal, Dr. Jan Wallace, for outstanding contribution to Australia's Antarctic program, particularly through remote medicine practices. To receive the Commendation for Distinguished Service, Sergeant Ashley Louise Liversedge, for distinguished performance of duties in warlike operations as a medic with Task Group Taji, whilst deployed in Iraq on Operation Okra on the 11th of March 2020. Please join Her Excellency in congratulating all of today's recipients. Your Excellency, I now invite you to address us.
Tony Bates, Secretary, Department of Education. Bridget Monagle, Commissioner, Victorian Public Sector Commission. Brigadier Patrick Murray, representing the Senior Army Officer of Victoria. Dr. Peter Rogers, representing the Chair of the Order of Australia Association, Victoria Branch. Rupert Meyer, Community Representative, the Order of Australia Council. Distinguished guests, which there are so many in the room today, thank you. Let me begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and recognise Aboriginal elders in the room with us this morning. These lands have supported countless generations, and yet our modern nation, and it is modern, the Commonwealth of Australia, is younger than this ballroom that we gather in. Australia found its beginnings as Australia, as the modern nation, on the first day of 1901. And this Saturday will mark exactly 125 years since the first National Parliament met in the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton. And of course, this house housed the first Governor-General, and this room, just so you're clear, was built more than 175 years ago. That time, 125 years ago, in the Royal Exhibition Buildings, was immortalised by Tom Roberts' famous painting, The Big Picture. The scene that day was described in the Argus as a gathering of free people, hopeful people, courageous people, entrusted with the working out of their own destiny and rejoicing in their liberty. It was indeed not until 1949 that Australian citizenship was officially established for the people of this land. And even at that time, not all the people of this land. And just over 5 decades since, an honours system was created to recognise the contributions of our people. And it's that honours system that brings us here today. It is worth reflecting on the birth of our national democracy. It was a moment of great fanfare and ceremony. Yet the constitution that brought this nation into being is not distinguished by its bold rhetoric. Within it, we find no grand declaration of rights, no manifesto proclaiming our shared values as a people. That was left for us to determine. And you could say our national identity is still unfurling today. It is a topic of ongoing conversation, and one that can sometimes seem difficult to define in words alone. The readiness of some to declare what is un-Australian is a frequent impulse, turning us from what brings us together. But the best way to understand these values is probably not by talking about them, but rather by experiencing them. Earlier this year, Victorians faced the perils of fire and flood, which threatened lives and livelihoods across our state. And as I have this year visited affected communities, the ideals that unite us as a people have been palpable. I felt them when meeting with Blaze Aid volunteers in Euroa, who just returned from a day of rebuilding fences for a farmer whose hands had been burnt by the fire. I felt them as I entered the public hall in Yark, a tiny, tiny little settlement, which had been transformed into a donation centre by residents looking to support their neighbours who'd lost everything. And I felt these values when speaking with the owners of the general store in Wye River, who, after having their business gutted by flash flooding, awoke the next day to find people of all ages armed with shovels to dig through the layers of mud. Perhaps due to many decades of facing such emergencies, as Australians we may be very good at banding together during these trying times. But it would be incorrect to assume that we are only united in hardship. That banding together may be most visible during a crisis, but our instincts to band together, the instincts about fairness and treating people well and equally, do not emerge from thin air. They thrive quietly but constantly across all sections of our society, and the contributions we've acknowledged today are the living testament to that fact. We've seen people recognised for their deep commitment over many decades in their professional careers, and also, as well and separately, in their volunteer service. We've seen people recognised for successfully chasing a dream to give back to their communities. And we've seen people recognised for acts of courage and strength in the face of adversity. And all the recognitions we've given today and will give over the next ceremonies in this week of investitures, they go much further in expressing our shared values than words ever would. In celebrating what people have done, what they have given, through which we do through our Australian honours system, we help ensure that the values that are important to all of us are nurtured and preserved for generations to come. There is no document prescribing how we should act towards one another. No nation is perfect, yet we have reason to be proud of our society and the society we've built together and continue to build within the democratic framework we've chosen. I think we remain free, hopeful, and courageous people. We should continue to rejoice in our liberty as we work out what we think is best for our shared destiny. 125 years ago, we were offered the promise of shaping that destiny for ourselves. Today, we celebrate the work of those who've done much to secure what we value. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. If you are able to do so, would you please stand and join in the singing of the first verse of the national anthem and remain standing for the departure of the Governor. Thank you.
That concludes official proceedings for today. On behalf of all of us at Government House, we congratulate all the award recipients. The state apartments will now be open for viewing. On behalf of the Governor, we invite you to stay and enjoy the hospitality of Government House. Thank you and good afternoon.